Hey everybody, Tony UV again. Stage 4, PASTA, the process for attack simulation and threat analysis. Stage 4 is about threat analysis. This is about thinking about what threats could obviously affect the application. Now, one of my pet peeves is that those that do threat modeling never consider threats, right? They look at maybe static threats, threats that don't change. There's different types of threat categorization models that are out there, and they never change. They were the same 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. Threats change every single year. So why use a categorization tool or matrix that is actually going to be static? Your application isn't static. Your technology components that go into the application are not static. So in this stage, we're going to think about all the ways in which good threat intel, good threat data could actually improve our own PASTA threat model. So let's begin. From a threat intel standpoint, threat intel in the book that was written many years ago in 2015, it is about looking at what outside threat advisories are out there against components. Remember stage 2, we had our ingredients of our application. Maybe there's threat advisories for code off the shelf for software that is in your software, right? And so open source libraries, okay? Maybe some dependencies on third-party software services, SaaS-based services that might be vulnerable to attack. You want to be able to reconcile those threat advisories to your own model, right? To the own technology that you have. And so let's say that you find some good threat intel that relates to advisories against the use of, Apache or PHP versions. And there are actually a lot of active exploits that are creating denial of service because of a vulnerability in PHP. And there's a threat advisory showing that there's a lot of exploits in the wild. So the first thing is obviously to reconcile your threat intel with what you are working with in stage 2 of PASTA, which is technology enumeration, aka defining your attack surface. So with good threat intel, you can see, does this affect my application or does it not affect my application? Another source of information as an ingredient that you want to use is to be able to use threat data. Now, threat data comes from within your organization. You might have web application firewalls, endpoint protection software, different types of preventative or detective software and or physical appliances that are stopping attacks. And that data is threat data, and it can be used to say, hey, we have a problem here. We have a problem in our DMZ or in a cloud service provider where an increased amount of attacks of a certain type have actually happened. Brute force attacks, authentication bypass attacks. The whole environment is telling you something. Take that data as an ingredient in PASTA to basically identify what possible threats match with a threat library that you want to create. Now, threat library is the most important output of stage 4. You want to create a list of threats that pertain to your application. So let me go into financial services. Let's say that you're a fintech company that is providing a business to consumer card, and you are relying on a third-party provider to provide maybe banking information for your customers as part of that B2C fintech product that you're offering them. Well, that interface might actually be using a protocol that might be vulnerable for attack. It might be maybe something that is wrong with the actual endpoint, the API endpoint, the technology endpoint that could be exploited, that could be thereby leveraged to go into your application model. In application decomposition, one thing that we didn't really spend too much time on is trust. In this example of a fintech application, you might be trusting a third-party service provider with data and implicitly consuming data or whatever into your application. And so that implicit trust, coupled with maybe a threat advisory on a technology component in their stack, could actually spell a threat or attack vector that you may want to consider. So at the end of the day, threat analysis is really being able to build a threat library, define what are the possible threats that could affect your application. It's not always about data compromise. Oftentimes when there's threat modeling evangelists that are out there, they focus on the data. There's a lot of industries that they don't even care about the data. Utility sector is one of them. Sometimes it's about continuity, and continuity is king. So it's not just about data security. It's about service continuity. It could be about data integrity. Think about healthcare. Doctors making decisions real time. They need accurate information on patients in order to make a decision that could affect their life. Integrity is king. So those sort of things, confidentiality, integrity, availability, would be rooted in stage one. What do I care about? Do I care about integrity? Do I care about data protection? Do I care about availability? Reconcile that to the threats that you are developing as a threat library. I'm concerned about extortion. I'm concerned about information compromise. I'm concerned about someone living in my application environment, right? And just setting up shop and squatting in there and consuming memory resources, processing resources, etc. The list goes on and on. So build a threat library custom to you, add in the ingredients of a threat intel, find good threat intel, much similar to adding good flour, good cheese, good fresh tomatoes, good eggs. And then also threat data. In your own corporate environment where you're hosting these applications, you're going to have systems that are sharing important information that could spell threat concerns for your application. So that's stage 4 in a nutshell. We're going to move over to stage 5, which is vulnerability analysis. So stay tuned for that.